kind of got a little hard on myself because I'm like, you know what? You only have 4 years left. She's going to college. You really need to make up for it. And we still have to deal with life. We still have to.
Welcome to Fatherhood Voices, breaking the toxic cycle. Dive in as real dads bear all, the mess ups, make ups, and every heartfelt moment in between. It's raw, it's real, and it might just change the way you see family.
Welcome to another edition of Fatherhood Voices. Now, to me, this is a special edition, especially because we're going into getting close to Father's Day. Mother's Day just passed, and we're getting close to Father's Day. And I have the honor, the privilege of bringing on one of my spiritual brothers, someone that I've come to admire and respect, and to be a part of his journey as he dabbled into plant medicine and started to have his awakening on becoming a better husband, a better father. And, you know, the kicker here is not only have I met his wife and kids, but I also had the opportunity to spend a week in Guatemala with his parents and to see what life was like for him and just how his parents showed him love in different ways. So, Charles, brother, I'm excited to have you here. This is long been overdue that I've been wanting to do this. But welcome and thank you for coming on. And if you can just share with the audience a little bit about you, where you're from, your backstory, where you live now and what you do. And then we'll kind of dive into the little Charles and how he grew up.
Awesome. Edward, thanks for having me on your podcast. I'm super excited. Thank you for being an amazing friend and a journey brother. I'm excited to be here. We always have great conversations, very deep conversations, healing conversations, and to be able to record it and share this with other fathers it is super awesome. So thank you for what you do. A little bit about myself. I was born and raised in Redondo Beach, and I currently still live in Redondo Beach, which is a blessing and a dream come true. I am an electrical contractor. We do electrical work on residential homes, and yeah, that's I have 3 children. I have a 33-year-old stepson, an 18-year-old daughter who's just wrapped up her first year of college, and a 17-year-old boy who's going to be a senior in high school. Yes. And then married to my beautiful wife, Shawnee.
How long have you been married?
20 years.
20 years. Awesome. Congratulations on that.
Thanks.
So I'll start off with just kind of diving into what childhood looked like for you. You know, strong emphasis on your father, but even just your parents in general. But what was life growing up in Redondo Beach? Because we were neighbors. I grew up, but it was in Compton. So I was on the other side, you know?
Yes.
But how was life in Redondo Beach? Because that definitely has its own flavor. And being by the beach, you know, I can only imagine just life, you know.
Yeah. I was super blessed because I was born, you know, I grew up very close to the beach and grew up going to the beach a lot. And all my friends, though, the interesting part was where I grew up in my earlier years, it was all blonde hair, blue eyed friends. And so I was the only Hispanic in my neighborhood that English was my second language. So that was interesting because it was, you know, my parents didn't speak English, and all my friends were blonde hair, blue eyed Americans. But it was still an awesome childhood. Everybody was super nice to me. I had tons of friends in the neighborhood, and you know, back then, being outside and playing outside was what we did. So it was an awesome childhood. Once I was 10, my parents moved to Guadalajara, Mexico, and I went to live with my grandmother, who also lived in Redondo, and she lived in North Redondo. And that was awesome too, because I had a ton of friends in the neighborhood, and we were just always out having a lot of fun, seeing what kind of trouble we can get into. Our goal was to make every day a more exciting day than the day before. And yeah, just went to the beach a lot, grew up surfing, a lot of skateboarding, and involved in the music scene and different music scenes. Growing up in the 80s and 90s, there was always some cool music coming out. So
And what's your earliest childhood memory that you remember of you and your father? Before he moved to Guadalajara. So
yeah, so from being born till I was 10, and when he did move to my mom, dad, I'm the oldest brother, and my younger brother and sister all moved to Guadalajara. But before that, my dad was just hardworking guy, worked at a car dealership. He was a car washer, car detailer, and just helped the dealership out with whatever they needed to get the cars ready to sell. And he just was a hard worker Monday through Friday. And then come the weekends, there was always family parties, there was always events. And unfortunately, he liked to drink a lot on the weekends. And so he was a very big drinker. And that was the only really downside. During the week, he didn't talk, he wasn't very involved. So my mom pretty much did everything around the house, got us ready for school, made sure we had food on the table. She was a super mom, but she was the one that did everything. My dad would just go to work, come home, eat dinner, go to bed, and wasn't very involved. Didn't talk to us much. Wasn't very. We knew he loved us because of his work ethic, and we knew he was trying to provide for us, but it just wasn't ever spoken really.
mm, I can relate to that because had a very similar upbringing. Mom was super mom. Dad really wasn't connected. So, when I look back and I look back to, I was never taught how to change a tire, how to change oil, that stuff. It just came from just over time or in school. But I didn't get the traditional, what father and son would do. And I look back and, sometimes it hurts, a little disappointing because I would have wanted those moments to connect and bond. So,
Yeah, and I agree. When I really start to reflect back on it, I'm like, man, I wish it was different. But I've had the opportunity recently. My grandfather's still alive, so my dad's father is 97, and I just had breakfast with him yesterday. He's from Guadalajara, and he happened to be in town, and so I'm going to take it back a little further and try not to drag it out. But my grandfather, when you look back on it, my grandfather never gave my dad attention either. And it's interesting how that just ends up getting passed down to each generation until we actually break that cycle, if we want to. But interesting story was my grandfather took my dad at 4 years old and his younger brother at 2 years old, took them to Guadalajara, Mexico, left my grandmother here with one daughter and pregnant. And my dad and his brother get to Guadalajara, Mexico. My grandfather gets a new wife, has 3 more children, and my dad and his brother end up getting raised by their grandmother in Guadalajara. And so my dad never got the love, the affection that he wanted. So he never had the tools that he needed to be a great father, which then when I look back at my fatherhood and I describe myself, I was exactly the same as my dad. I wasn't very involved. The one thing I did change is I was very loving. And so I did tell my kids, I love you every single night. I put them to bed every night. I prayed to them every night. I sang to them every single night. And I did that consistently for 10 years straight until they just didn't want me in their bed anymore. Yeah.
Isn't it funny how the things that we lack as a child, a lot of times we say we're not going to do this when we're fathers, but then we go in the same pattern, because I can definitely relate to that. Everything that my dad did is what I repeated that cycle with my three daughters. And even though as a child, I said, I'm never going to be like this, because I recognized it at a young age because of watching other uh, friends and how their families interacted with them. Did you, when you were small growing up, did you realize that your dad wasn't present, or did it happen later in life?
It happened. It happened a lot later in life, and I didn't notice because it seemed very common the way he acted and the way he treated us. And when I would look at other Hispanic men, they all seem to do the same thing. They were big drinkers on the weekends. They were some of the hardest workers that I've ever met, but they also were some of the biggest drinkers I've ever met. So yeah, it didn't seem out of the ordinary, or I didn't feel at that time that I was lacking love. I felt like it was normal. So it wasn't until later on that when I started looking back, going, "Oh, this is why I act certain ways."
And can you recall a memory, a childhood memory that just something that just stands out for you? That when you think back to your childhood, maybe a memory you have with your dad, that it's like one of those aha moments or emotional moments that it's like, that signifies my childhood. Is there anything particular event? And it could be positive or negative, but um,
Yeah, that because he just was so low key, and my mom did everything. There wasn't a lot of those moments. There's one moment that I could barely think of, was he did take me to Pep Boys and buy me a bike, and it was an Evil Knievel bike.
ah,
So that and I've never thought of that. So thanks for asking that question.
wow. I believe
But
I have heard that in years, but I remember him and his famous jumps.
yeah, yeah. So that's one memory I can think of that's a great memory.
That's freaking awesome. And
Yeah.
then going into your teenage years, as you're going into junior high school and high school, did he show up like at graduations? Um, you know,
Yeah, so I was really involved in sports. I loved playing soccer and baseball, and since he left when I was 10, they just weren't around. My parents weren't around. They would come back for the summers. So they would come back every single summer, and they would work for 2 months and then head back to Guadalajara. So my grandmother raised me. I had two aunts that were single and an uncle that was single, and we all lived in the same house.
mm,
So my aunts and uncles are the ones that would really pitch in and were at most of my events. So that was nice. Even though my dad wasn't available to be there, I did have lots of support from my aunts and uncles.
it's great that you had that support in place. I'm going to ask you kind of a delicate question that just came up. Uh, because your parents left to Guadalajara, did you hold any resentment that they weren't there? Or, I'm luckily you had the support in place, that because a lot of times people don't have the support in place, and it's fortunate. It sounds like you did. Um, but you, as going into your teenage years, did you ever wonder, like, you know,
I didn't have I didn't really know what it was, because I think what happened, Edward, when and I found this more out after doing our plant medicine journeys and things like that, and really diving deep into it. But in my teenage years, I think by then, because they left when I was 10, so by then I had already built this cinder block wall around my heart to not feel my emotions. So I built this wall around my heart so that I wouldn't miss my parents, so that I wouldn't be sad that my parents weren't around. So I built this wall, and I even remember when I would get sad, I would remember going into my mind and being like, you're a tough guy. Don't be sad. You're not allowed to be sad. Men can't cry. So I really ended up building this tough guy persona of I'm this badass and you don't miss your parents. So just be happy, keep doing what you're doing. So I didn't have a lot of resentments. It turns out I really the other interesting thing that I didn't know until we embarked on this journey is because I built that wall around my heart so that I wouldn't have resentments, I wouldn't be sad that they were gone. I never realized that I'm actually a really sensitive guy, and I'm just realizing even today in my 50s that I'm a super sensitive guy, and I didn't learn that until I learned it from my son. And I'm like, wow, my son's a little bit emotional. Like, what's going on here? And then I'm like, shit, I'm emotional. But because of my abandonment issues, I built this wall of not allowing myself to be sad and not allowing myself to be sensitive and feel the emotion. So there wasn't a lot of resentment at the time. I actually, because my neighborhood was so fun, I felt really grateful that I got to stay in Redondo Beach. I got to live with my aunts and uncles and my grandmother, and I didn't have to move to Guadalajara. So there was also some gratitude in it as well.
You touched on a wow, something powerful, and you called it you built the cinder blocks wall around your heart, and I can see that being a resource that we're going to build out. Because I think other children that and I'll just say fathers that don't step up and abandon their kids, and that wasn't the case for you, but I'm saying fathers that aren't present in their lives. And it's a beautiful analogy because you said you built a cinder block wall around your heart. And that's what we do as children. But the way you put it visually, as you were talking, I was just visualizing these blocks just growing and growing and growing. And every time the struggle got worse, the wall just grew, and you just protected it. And so now I wonder, because you built that block wall and the realization happened later on, what were some things that either were done or could have been done to start to bring down that wall? Because this is something that kids are going through now that are having abandonment issues, that have resentment towards mothers and fathers. And when they're in that space, a lot of times they go towards negative behaviors, gangs, alcohol, drugs, self-harm. So when we think of a child inside a wall that's protecting their heart, were there any things that your aunts did or your grandma did to start to soften it? And then now as an adult, looking back, what could they have done, or even what could your parents done, even though they weren't physically there? What could they have done to at least start to bring that wall down?
It's a great question. You know, I think what my aunts and my grandmother and yeah, I lived with my cousin as well, and I think the kids in my neighborhood, what would soften it is just their love and support, just having a good time with them and laughing together and joking together, and that would really soften it up. But I think it also stayed up longer because my parents would only come for the summertime and then they would leave. So I would have to keep that wall up so that when they would leave again, it wouldn't hurt as bad. And so I think what happened is just still not being able to live together kept that wall up. So if a child has a father that's not in his life, and or a mother that's not in his life, and he has some kind of abandonment issues, it would be really tough for him to lower that guard. I think it's not until they really find the tools that are required to know how to, because we always want somebody else to save us, or somebody else to build us up. But I think another thing people don't talk about is how do we build ourselves up? How do we give ourselves the self-love and attention that we seek from our mom or our dad? If we can give that self-love to ourselves, and when's the last time you just hugged yourself and you went, you know what? I love you for just being you. You know, God made you a piece of art that you're just so special. And nobody teaches us how to just give ourselves that love. So that would be my advice, is if there is a way to teach children how to just love themselves, and know that they're just amazing people, and they don't need their mom and dad sometimes to give them that love if they're not around. You know, obviously if the parents are around, man, you can't beat that. If a parent can give you a hug, and like my big thing is just telling my kids I'm proud of them, because most of the time that's all we want from our parents, is we just want to know that they approve of us, and that we're making them proud, and that's it.
Wow. You know, it's I get this question a lot where a mom will reach out and says, "Well, what do I do because the father's not present in their life?" And something that I now come to realize is that even if the father's not present, it doesn't mean that you can't direct your son or daughter towards a family member, an uncle, a cousin, a grandfather, even a coach, someone you admire and look up to kind of step in as that father figure. Just because it's not their father doesn't mean that a boy and a girl still don't need their father. They still crave that attention, love, support.
Yes.
And
I think you're absolutely right. I had gone to this muscle testing kind of energy healer, and I went because my wife was going to her, and my wife's like, "You got to go to her, and she's great." And I thought, there's nothing wrong with me. Like, why do I got to go to that? And ended up just having some powerful breakthroughs. And one of the breakthroughs was exactly what she said. Is she asked me, she goes, "Hey, when you look at the people that you know, who is a good father example for you? Was there a male figure in your life that you noticed he was a great father to his kids?" And all of a sudden, I remembered this gentleman. His name was Sonny Garcia. And he would just be so present when he would talk to me. And he would just, he was interested in what I was doing. And he coached his daughter's soccer team. And he came over to me and he's like, "Hey, Charles, will you help me coach my girls' soccer team?" And I was a teenager, and I was like, wow, like this guy trusts me to help him out. And so when she mentioned, is there someone that you've watched and seen that he's doing a great job at being a father, when I thought about him, I just started bawling. And I was just like, wow, this man was a great father. And so she goes, "Okay, now visualize everything that he did for his kids and replicate it, and do what he did, act the way he acted." And she's like, "Unfortunately, you weren't able to see that in your father or anybody in your immediate family, but this guy was put into your life so that you can learn those tools from him. It doesn't have to be your own blood." So you're absolutely right. I think that could work.
now, is he still alive?
He is not. He is not, unfortunately. Yes.
That would have been great to reach out to him and let him know. Did you ever share with him, that how he impacted you, or did this just come up in that sense?
I did when I first started learning electrical work. he asked me to do some work on his house.
Mhm.
And then further into my career, he even told me, he's like, "Hey, Charles, I'm really proud of what you've done. And you started this business and you took over a business and he said, I'm proud of your accomplishments."
Wow.
And you know, those are words that we didn't really hear growing up. And I got to thank him, and I was like, well, you know, you started me on this journey. You trusted me to come into your home when I really didn't know what I was doing. So I did get the opportunity to thank him. So that was nice. He also had a brother-in-law that when I was at the funeral, I was able to tell his brother-in-law, like, you know, you and Sonny really influenced my life. Watching you guys as parents, I learned a lot, and I just wanted to thank you for just being great men and great mentors. Yeah.
That's powerful right there. It's funny how someone's act of kindness or just, or it is, being receptive to bringing you in and getting you involved can have such a shift, a dynamic shift. And I'm sure if, you respected him enough that if you would have gone down the wrong path and he would have said like, hey, you need to knock it off, his words would have probably meant something because you
Oh,
didn't.
100%. 100%.
Wow.
Yeah.
Now, as you get older and you go and you start your family and start the trek of fatherhood, what did that look like for you? Here you're grown up, your parents, are living in Guadalajara, you're raised by your grandma, cousins, uncles, aunts. How does fatherhood show up for you?
So you know, I kind of replicated what my dad did, you know, and my goal when I became a father, my goal was just to be able to provide a safe home and and be a supporter and really be there to support my wife. And I was able to do that. But the part that I was lacking was being more of an emotional support for my wife, also being more of an emotional support for my kids. So I ended up doing the same thing that my father did. Is I actually became a workaholic, and I became a workaholic and just worked a lot of hours. Had, you know, three businesses, and I just kept myself so busy in work that I wasn't helping my wife as much as I probably could have. But at that time, she was a super mom, and it was, as I look back on this journey, my wife is a lot like my mom,
Mm.
where my wife ran the house. She took care of the kids. She dressed them. She made sure that, you know, they were ready for school and their events and everything. And I would just head to work at 6 in the morning. I wouldn't get back till 7 or 8 at night. I would then have dinner, put the kids to bed routine wise, and, you know, tell them I love them and pray to them and sing to them and put them to bed. And that was my favorite part of the day. And then there was times when I would just go right back to work, and I would 9, 10 o'clock at night, I would start doing paperwork. And so my wife was, she kind, because of her situation, she probably wouldn't have let me run the house, put it that way. She was very controlling. She wanted everything to go her way, and that was because of her traumas. So I had no problem letting her do everything. It just, once the kids got into high school is when I was driving my daughter to high school. I dropped her off, and as I was driving to work, I got super emotional because I'm like, I can't believe my daughter's going to be a freshman and it's the first time I've ever taken her to school. And it just broke my heart. And so, yeah, that's when I was like, wow, like I've been so involved in work. I've been so worried about being broke and so worried about failing. Yet I think I might have failed a little bit on the father end of it. But I also realized that I did really good with the tools that I had. And being an electrician, we have to have all the right tools to make sure that we're safe. We don't get electrocuted, right? And unfortunately, those were the tools that I had, and I did the best I could with them. But I always want to be the best I can be. And when that broke my heart, that's what put me on the journey of like, okay, something's got to change. I got 4 years until my daughter goes to college. Uh, I need to change some things in my life. And that's kind of how that journey started.
You know, when you were talking, it just reminded me of a statistic I read not too long ago, is that 95% of the time that we spend with our children are between the time they're born and the time 19 or 20. And then after that, they get consumed, they get consumed with school and relationships, and then they start friends and so forth. And, with that right there, it just reminds me that we as parents, sometimes we don't show up for them and time's running out.
Yes.
And, it's sad to see that sometimes we don't realize it till later on in life. But, it's just a sad statistics, that sometimes we've effed up this time, where we weren't present, to have that aha moment, that epiphany that, oh my gosh, she's a freshman and this is the first time I've driven her to school. Yeah, it can be gut wrenching, but also to have that self realization to start to shift it.
Yes.
It's never too late. One of the things that I'm trying to instill, because I was the same way, entrepreneur, workaholic. My addiction was work and alcohol, but it was actually more work than alcohol. So one of the things that I'm trying to do to make up, because now my children are adults, is family nights on Sundays, game night. Now, they don't always go as planned because, there's still a lot of healing to be done,
Yeah.
and to say that it's not a shit show most of the time, is an understatement. But I'm trying to make up for that time, and we don't always do it, but we're trying to make it more of a structured activity where we're getting together at least once a month, because we also want to include their significant others. My daughters, their boyfriends or fiancés, as they trek into that, so that we start to make up that. I don't want to say, well, maybe it is making up for it, but just not to lose that connection.
Right. Yeah. And I love what you're doing, and I love how you share your stories, and especially when you're like, if your daughter invites you somewhere, you just show
Oh
up.
my goodness.
That's so
Yeah.
great. But I also feel I kind of got a little hard on myself, because I'm like, you know what, you only have 4 years left. She's going to college, and you really need to make up for it. And of course, we still have to deal with life. We still have to run our businesses. And I was kind of beating myself up, and then I reminded myself that we still have a long life left. And if I'm in my 50s, I still got 30 years to be involved with my daughter. I still have 30 years to be involved with my boys. And we have so many different seasons. Now she's in college and just in her first relationship with her boyfriend. And like you said, I get to hang out with them both. Next thing you know, it's going to be marriage, and I get to be involved in marriage. Next thing you know, she's going to have kids. I get to be involved in the grandchild. And then next thing you know, more kids. So I'm like, okay, don't beat yourself up too bad, because we have plenty of life left. And make sure to remember that childhood so that you can really come up with a game plan to be more involved. Exactly what you're doing is having those extra nights and planning those extra events. And one thing I did about a year or two ago, maybe 2 years ago, was I did this course called Vivid Vision. And what I really liked about it is they really involve breath work in it, and really creating this new story for your life. And in that story, I wanted to just bond more with my kids, but because mom was so involved in their life, they we couldn't find things for us to do, just me and the kids. And and especially in their teenage years, you're like, hey, let's go here. They're like, nah. Okay, let's do this. Nah. So finally I asked them, I said, what do you guys want to do that is our thing, that doesn't involve mom, and it's just our thing? And they said, you know what, Dad, we want to start snowboarding. And I said, perfect. And it was so cool because I wrote it in my vivid vision that I want to start doing an activity with my kids, and I think it might be snowboarding. And all of a sudden, it came out of their mouth that this is what they want to do. So I was just like, yeah, finally, there's something we get to do. So we went and bought all the gear. We bought passes, and for the last 2 years, that's been our thing that we do. So that's been really cool.
That's freaking awesome. I love that, is having them pick an activity, because we're so quick to want to point out things that we want to do that we forget. Maybe they just want to go to a gamers convention. You know, maybe they
Yeah,
want, sometimes what we're thinking, what they want, we're totally off,
yeah, yeah,
One of the cool things that I've been able to experience with my oldest daughter and now my middle daughter, I know my youngest, it's going to happen. But my oldest daughter will call me up and say, hey, Dad, like just a couple of weeks ago, she called me and said, hey, we're going to hurricanes in Huntington Beach. Me and my boyfriend, we're going to meet some friends. Come on, meet us. Yeah, absolutely. In my mind, the old me is like, you want me to pay, But no, it wasn't that. She just wanted to hang out. She's invited me to like speakeasies in Pasadena and different things. So I love the fact that we're developing this relationship that she wants to include me when she's going and doing things. Because especially with my oldest daughter, I didn't speak to her for almost 6 years, because of ego and pride and so forth. And now my middle daughter will call me up and she says, hey, Dad, we're in Fullerton today. Are you at home? Do you want to go do something? And it could be something as simple as getting on the scooters, or we went to the driving range a couple of weeks ago, or we went to Universal Studios. And then now that my youngest is in a relationship, I'm looking forward to the day when she calls and says, hey, Dad, let's hang out. So the reason I'm sharing that is because it's never too late. And that's what I hear you saying. It's never too late. And being able to connect with them with something that they want to do, and then now give them that safe place where you're not I don't necessarily consider myself a parent anymore, as much as I still want to guide them, but I think I've already, when they get to their adult years, I think we've given them everything that we can, because now they go to college, they develop their own way of thinking, and conservative or liberal, whatever it is, but they come up with their own thought process. So I think we've done our job, and now we just have to step back and learn to be, I want to say, a friend, and maybe that's a little controversial, but I see my relationship with my adult children now as, yes, I'm your parent, secondary, but one is I want a different relationship. I want to be able to hang out with you. I want to be able to experience things with you. I don't always want to be the one that you just come to when when you need something, or when, so I don't know if that makes sense. That was kind of
yeah, yeah. No, that does make sense, and yeah, that job is over, right? And this is a new career, the, of just being really just their supporter and their guardrail if they need it.
I like that. I like that. So as you started to repeat the same patterns that your father did, stepping into working hard, and then you have an amazing wife who stayed home and ran everything behind the scenes so you could go out and do what you needed to do. How did plant now? I'm going to now shift and go into plant medicine, because we met through a coaching program that we were in together. And then we got to experience sitting and journey together and having this beautiful aha moments and revelations. And we've shared a lot of laughter, a lot of joy, a lot of tears. And how did plant medicine start to change the dynamics of you as a father, you as a husband? How did that come into play?
I think The beautiful thing about plant medicine is that is what broke down the cinder block wall.
Hmm.
And talking about this, like the Miley Cyrus song, it came in like a wrecking ball.
Love it. I love it. Love it.
So yeah, so that the plant medicine, really came in and really broke down that cinder block wall around my heart. It really exposed my heart. And of course, you come out of that just full of love and full of emotion. And it had been a long time since I felt my heart. So when that wall came down, it was just like, wow, I forgot what an amazing heart I have. And so there was just so many breakthroughs. A lot of the childhood abandonment issues and seeing the amount of pressure that I put on myself. One of the visuals in my journey was that at 10 years old, when my parents moved away, I put the pressure on myself that I was going to be the one that takes care of my entire family. So it showed me that I actually was never really a child. At 10 years old, I became an adult because I put it in my mind that I was going to be responsible to take care of my entire family. Nobody asked me to do that. It just happened. And one of the reasons that my parents said that they were leaving to Mexico is they said that they cannot afford to live in the USA. And so somehow I built it into my mind that I'm going to figure out how to support them, because if I can make enough money and if I can buy a home and I can bring them back from Guadalajara, they'll never leave me again. And I won't have these abandonment issues. And it was those kind of beautiful stories that came up in these plant medicine journeys that just gave me the self-awareness of who I am, that there's no way that counseling could have ever showed me this stuff. And so plant medicine for me was the most amazing thing I've ever done. As I was blessed that my wife also was doing plant medicine, and she had a very similar upbringing. She was raised by her grandparents. And it's just amazing how we came together, that we had the same traumas and we obviously had the same energy and frequency that brought us together. And we were best friends before we got married. But once we got into our marriage, raising our kids, owning businesses, and at that time, all the influencers were talking about hustle and grind. And I was just like, okay, how can I out hustle myself every single day? And so my wife and I lost a lot of communication, and we were just busy. She owned her own business and raising 3 kids. And so that plant medicine allowed our hearts to open, and it allowed us to communicate a lot better. We were communicating from the heart instead of communicating from scarcity and fear. So plant medicine was the best.
One of the things I always like when people ask me about, plant medicine, I say it allows you to stop keeping score. Is the best analogy, is when you're thinking about your decisions and your thoughts and remembering, your heart's open, as opposed to the resentment, the hurt, and how many times you've done this or that. What about the plant medicine journey? So it opened up your heart and you started, well, like I said, it came in like a wrecking ball. It started to knock down those cinder block walls. Did it spark some open, transparent, real conversations with your parents? Like where you got to just Like maybe there's something we just never talked about. This is just the way life was. But now little Charles wants to share he's found his voice and he wants to let you know how he felt. Did that conversation ever happen with your parents?
It it has in small increments, and the other beautiful thing about plant medicine is when you heal yourself, and it automatically trickles down to your family members, your parents, your children. And so the beautiful thing about the plant medicine is that the more I started healing, I think they saw a shift in me, and they saw me happier and more loving and softer, and automatically they just became more loving, softer. And so and I did get to have conversations with them, when on that trip when I was in Guadalajara, maybe what was it, like 3 years ago, I went there alone, and that was the first time that I was with my parents alone, just me and them. I had never really hung out with them just by myself for 2 weeks straight. And I was able to have those conversations about me being alone, not having them around. But I also got to thank them because I feel like a lot of things, there's also positive in it. It made me more independent. It made me a stronger person. My dad was suffering from alcoholism, and especially, as you know, in Mexico, they drink a lot more than they do in the States. And my younger brother and sister had to be around that. And the only times in my life when I didn't feel safe was when my dad was drinking. And so the gift that came out of me getting to stay at my grandmother's was I didn't have to deal with me being scared of being around my dad when he's drinking.
It's I remember that journey. It was in Tulum.
Yes.
And I remember you come out of Journey and we're sitting around the table before dinner. And I remember you saying, I'm going to Guadalajara. I'm going to go speak to my parents. I remember that vividly. And that was from that journey. And then you were ready to book a ticket and head out.
Yes.
We'll make that happen.
Yes. Yes. So yeah, it definitely did help me gain my voice back, like you said.
And what about the relationship with your kids? So you come back and now you're realizing, not only dealing with your own internal, trauma with, little Charles and so forth, but what about as a father? Because I know for me, when I came out, it opened my heart and it made me just so appreciative. I took my kids for granted. I took everybody for granted, but it just opened my heart. So how did plant medicine show up for you as a father to your children, and then also your stepson, who's just another, like I said, we put these labels on, stepson, stepdaughter, but they're your kids. They're your kids. How did
Yeah.
you show up?
One beautiful thing about my wife is she's very vocal. The way I grew up, I probably would have not wanted to talk about plant medicine with my kids. It's not an easy subject to say, hey, yeah, I just took, this medicine and on this psychedelic journey, and then try to tell them they can't go do drugs or something. But because my wife is so vocal, which is why I love her. Um, we came back and we shared everything with them, and we tell them the traumas that we have and how we were able to see them, and how we were able to forgive, and how we were able to just let those old stories go that no longer serve us. And I had a conversation with my son and my daughter, and I got to describe to them, this is the way my dad was. He didn't express himself and hug me and tell me I love you. And my son to this day, we switched roles. So once I stopped tucking them in, like at 11, 12 years old, they started tucking us in. And so my son comes and kisses me on the forehead every night. And I told him, I want to be more affectionate. I want to be more loving to you guys. Sometimes I never really had those tools. I'm going to work on it, and I'm going to be more affectionate, more loving. But I also invite you guys to be more affectionate and more loving to me,
Mm.
because maybe you can be my teachers and show me, and not be afraid or embarrassed, because when you kiss me on the forehead at night, it's the best feeling in the world, and I love it, and it makes my day. And so that's how it's really helped out with the plant medicine. Is, again, it opens your heart, brings down the walls, and opens up communication. And so it's been a beautiful thing for our family. With my stepson, he's 33 now. We share our stories with him and our journeys. His I kind of played the same role with him with my children. Is I just wasn't really involved with disciplining and telling him what to do. I left that up to his mom and his dad, and I just was more of just a friend to him. Unfortunately, his dad died like 5 years ago, and right after his dad died, he ended up going through a hard period where he was drinking a lot, some drugs involved, and it got bad enough to where he had to go into rehab and things like that. He is not really, he kind of thinks we're a little crazy with all this plant medicine stuff. But what I do gotta say is, as soon as his mom started healing with her traumas and her pain, is when he got sober. He started excelling in life. He started excelling at his job. So even though he hasn't gotten involved with it, I think when the parent has the healing that they need, it trickles down automatically to their children. And without my wife having to do anything, by just her taking care of herself, healing her traumas, she's now at a different frequency. She's at a different energy. And your children feel that. He now is has more open conversations with us, and he's now calmer and more loving. And so I think it trickles down.
So here's my question for you. Have you asked him what's something he wants to do with you?
I haven't, but something beautiful has evolved, and I started sharing with him my love and passion for real estate. And he really engaged and was asking more questions, and he's like, I have some money. What do you think I should do with it? And I just shared some possibilities of what he can do with it. And man, he just dove right in. And recently we started a little investment business. And we just started an LLC together. It has, my first initial, his first initial, and so our thing is, we now bond around real estate investing together as a father and son. It's been beautiful. Yes.
No, and to be able to, you know, you're able to share your knowledge because I know you're involved in so many mastermind groups and your other business has been, investing and looking for properties and so forth. So that's going to be exciting that he has, a mentor and a coach that's not only open to learning, but not afraid to pull the trigger, not afraid to try new things and explore different options. So that's going to be a cool journey that
Yes.
you guys are on, and to see
Yes.
how that evolves and deepens a relationship. Because the one thing that we don't talk about as parents is is money always seems to be taboo.
Ooh,
Finances. And
ooh,
I know growing up when we struggled because, you know, being an entrepreneur, things weren't always great. And there were some times where I didn't know where the next meal was going to come from and how I was going to have money for the market and so forth. And then you shelter that from your kids. And um, what I've learned is I should have been transparent. I should have been open. And when I said no, you can't go on this trip out of the country with school. You can't. Why? Not because I didn't want you to, because we didn't have the financial means to do it.
yeah,
And so it's just now being on that journey. You know,
wow,
I don't know if
yeah.
you've ever experienced that.
I'm so glad that you brought that up, Edward. I just got back from Guadalajara again and spent another 7 days with my parents, and each time I do that, and my goal was just to be there and be present and hang out with them. But one of the breakthroughs that I had was I was listening to my dad and his stepbrother, and they were talking about their father and how he never wanted them to know how much money he had because he had so many children. He was afraid they were going to come ask him to borrow money or give them money. And so he created this big secret around money, and nobody's allowed to know how much he has, that then trickled down. And I was able to really look at my family dynamic and the culture around us and how everybody is so afraid of money. And I was listening to them tell stories, and they're like, "Oh yeah, that guy, he had this property." And it was supposed to be given to his kid, but somebody else came in and they stole it. They stole the property, and they were talking about people stealing money from each other. And I even told my dad, I said, "Dad, if you're afraid of somebody stealing money from you, God's not going to give you more money. God's only going to give you more money if you're not afraid of it. If you're afraid of it, if you're afraid of losing, if you're afraid of failing, He's not going to give you more money." And so the hard conversation I had with them is I said, "Dad, I'm here to break the cycle to not fear money, losing money, or fear of failing. So I need you to stop talking about that kind of stuff. Stop saying that this person is only involved with that person because he's rich, or this guy's only involved with that guy because he's trying to steal money from him." And I said, "So we're not allowed to have those conversations anymore because I want to break that cycle." And I said, "When you talk, have you ever had water coming out of a hose and you kink the hose and then it just trickles out?" I said, "When we talk negative about losing money or afraid of money, we put a kink in the hose. As soon as we stop fearing it and break those cycles of fear around money, with that you take the kink out and it just starts flowing." And I said, "That's the way I want to live my life. I want money to be able to flow through me and out to other people as well."
That's powerful. And I love the analogy that you use. Um, and then having that conversation with your father, because a lot of times we never are able to have that conversation. And,
Yeah.
our parents, they grew up in a different time. And so it's that scarcity mindset. And then we inherit that. And then now we are living in that scarcity mindset. And then we pass it on to our kids. And it's like I said, it's breaking that toxic cycle. It's somebody has to say, wait, enough's enough. We're not going to do things the way they've always been, the way we've always done them. We're going to do something different. So, no, that was
Yeah.
beautiful.
And I think, that's one of the biggest reasons I was a workaholic was because of all those fears and all those stories. And I don't want my kids to be workaholics. I want them to enjoy life. I want them to travel. I want them to not have that fear of having to, worry about that and think that the only solution is to work constantly.
The one beautiful thing, in addition to what plant medicine did for me, was not only open my heart and start the process of me reconnecting, but it really brought out the travel in me,
Yeah.
because I never traveled because I was always working, and I just got back from Nicaragua a couple weeks ago. Now I'm headed to Guatemala, and then so I'm trying to encourage my kids to travel, to get out there and explore, And I love going to these third world countries because it's very humbling to just see the other struggles that people are going to, and kind of to give myself grace when when sometimes we feel like we want more, to step back and go, wow, these are people that don't even have clean water coming out their sinks, or they don't have hot water. And those are extreme, but just to realize, like, we have to be thankful for what we got, and not be so quick to thinking things for granted, because we're always, we live in this world where we're constantly chasing the Joneses, and what do they have, and we want more. And if anything, plant medicine has helped me to purge out materialistic things and go back to the basics, love, friendship, community, those things that are free. But we
Yeah.
sometimes we're so clouded, you know.
Yes.
But wow. Any closing thoughts as we start to wrap this up? This has been a beautiful podcast, and thank you for sharing, and so much wisdom that came from this. And the most powerful thing for me was, I mean, there were a lot of powerful things, but just to hear how you as a child build up that block wall around your heart, and the process that it started to unravel it. Um, but any closing thoughts, Charles?
I think for me it's just, for any fathers out there, I think what has really helped me out is just gaining as much self-awareness about myself, and really learning as much as you can about yourself, because once you really dive in, we spend a lot of time on social media. You're probably spending 4 hours a night just on social media, but invest that time into finding coaches and mentors, and really gaining that self-awareness of who you are, because once you really find out who you are, and you're able to heal those traumas, it's going to help you become the best father possible. And so those are my closing thoughts, and my wishes for other fathers out there. And I could say I wish I found this stuff out sooner, but everything happens for a reason at the perfect timing. But yeah, if you're wanting to be the best father you can be, is really learn to love yourself, and really take care of yourself, and that's my advice.
And I'm going to just kind of piggyback on top of that, because all my life I've searched out becoming a better person. But when I say a better person, it was very self-centered, because it was becoming a better entrepreneur, a better business owner. And I engulfed motivational books and tapes, and then CDs, and then then you move to social media, and YouTube and so forth. And I searched all this out, how to build a business, and structure it, and time management, and but I never searched out how to be a better father. And the tools were out there. There's the books have been written, the stuff's out there, and it's just, looking back now, I just wasn't ready to receive it. But now,
Yeah.
to just remind people, yes, it's okay to want to search out to be a better entrepreneur, a better worker, but
Mindset or whatever.
that's the
But
most
you're
important thing
you're
is,
absolutely right. And the easiest test for fathers is, let's say you have Audible, right? So open up your Audible and show me how many books you have on how to be a better father, or show me the books on how to be a better husband. And you're absolutely right. I would go into my Audible, and me and my wife shared our Audible. All mine were 100 books on entrepreneurship, and hers were all on love, spirituality. And so yeah, so after plant medicine, I went on that journey and started getting the books on, what's masculine and what's feminine. And so you're absolutely right.
No, that just it inspired me to now. I have some credits left on my Audible. I'm gonna start to shift it and become more relationship based. I have been consuming more hardcover books, but yeah, I'm definitely gonna dive deeper into that.
And it's the same thing with podcasts too. It's look at your podcast. All my podcasts were business ones, and there's a lot of great people like yourself that have started these new ones that help you out with fatherhood and marriage and all that great stuff.
And a closing thought before I end this is something was said before we started the podcast, and you said, and this I need to make sure that we bring this out. Is you said, as men, we don't share our struggles with being in a relationship, being husbands, being fathers, but women do. And we need to change that dynamic. We need to change that it's okay for men to be vulnerable. Like it's okay to go to a gathering and the men go off to one side, the women go off to the other side, and the men are talking about sports and their investments and all this shit. But hold on, hold that thought. Okay, we might have to just have to edit that part out because my mom just got here, gonna go to lunch. But we as men, we don't talk about our struggles. We want to talk about this bullshit with sports and business, or we want to bitch and complain, but we don't talk about like how we're failing as fathers or as husbands or just in relationships. Like we don't want to be vulnerable, and that's something we have to change. That as men, it's okay because I think about a friend that committed suicide and he was struggling, and seen him a couple weeks before, and yeah, it was normal chop shop bullshit talk about business, but nobody knew he was struggling, what he was going through. And then he goes and commits suicide. And then she looked back and like, what's something I could have said to have helped him? But we didn't know.
Yeah,
And because he was so in his masculine that he wouldn't share, we just sit there, just kind of left kind of dumbfounded, I guess is a word. Like, what could I have done differently to at least let him know, like, hey, I feel your pain. I understand. And then granted, this was before plant, now with plant medicine, the conversations are different, but it's unfortunate that something like this happens.
yeah, yeah. No, you're absolutely right. And like I was sharing, is you hear women on the phone with their girlfriends or talking about how to be better moms, how to do things for the children and what schools are good for their children and what meals are good for their children and how they have those vulnerable conversations about how to be better mothers, and they give each other tips and advice. And us men don't talk about that. We, like you said, we'd rather talk about sports and our parties and things that we think make us look like better men,
Mm.
smarter men, accomplished. Making that shift and making the new goal. The old goal was the Lamborghini and the business. Let's make the new goal a great father, a loving father, and make that the shiny item instead of the Lamborghini and the business and the girls.
Wow, powerful. Brought tears to my eyes. The new $1 billion mindset. The new $1 billion mindset is being a better father, being a better husband.
Oh,
That's
oh,
that's the new mindset.
yeah,
Oh my,
yeah.
no, powerful, powerful episode. Thank you so much for sharing. You fathers out there, just know it's okay for men to be vulnerable. It's okay for men to share your insecurities, to share your struggles, and we can build businesses. We can be in build mode, but let's not forget why we're doing it, or why, because like they say, you can have as much money as you can, but you're not taking it with you. And my closing thought would be to mothers and fathers, but for fathers, What's going to be your legacy? What's your legacy that you're going to leave for your children?
Yeah. And also because the legacy we create, Edward, we've inherited what the 7 generations before us did. And now we're here to break the cycle. We're the new elders. So we're the new elders. The 7 generations below us are learning from us. And I want the 7 generations below me to love life and love themselves. And so we have to really make that change because we are the new elders. We are the new creators of the 7 generations below us.
Wow. Powerful, powerful words of wisdom. Thank you, brother. It's been an amazing talk. Look forward to connecting. We still, like I said, we're so close to each other. We have to get together and do dinner soon. And if not, we'll just go to Guadalajara again.
Summertime's coming, Edward. Yeah, you're always a great friend, and come visit us at the beach. We'll meet down there.
We got to take out your lowrider and we'll go cruising down towards Boulevard.
Yes, yes.
Thank you so much. Have a great rest of your Friday and have an amazing Memorial Day weekend.
Likewise, Edward. Take care, brother.
All right. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.